A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So glad to have you with us for another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. And coming up in just a matter of moments, as a matter of fact, our friend Rick Ector is going to join us from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit. If you are a watcher of Fox News, you may have seen Rick last night on Tucker Carlson in the first of a two-part series, taking a look at self-defense, violent crime in Detroit, why people want to carry a gun to protect their lives. This was a fantastic segment. The folks at Tucker talked not only with Rick Ector, but spoke with a woman who was forced to protect her life, and also talked with the police chief there in Detroit, James Craig, who, unlike a lot of big city police chiefs, vocally supports the right to keep and bear arms and vocally supports individuals obtaining their concealed carry license. So I had the opportunity to sit down with our friend Rick Ector from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit just a short time ago to talk about part one of this two-part segment and to talk about that culture of lawful gun ownership and that culture of self-defense that Rick is trying to inculcate there in the Motor City. Take a look and a listen. Rick Ector, it is so good talking to you. Thank you, by the way, for making time to talk with me today. You're a busy guy right now.
Man, it's been absolutely bananas. And you know what? You don't have to thank me. Allow me to thank you, man. Hey, Cam and Company has been an institution in the Second Amendment, man. And I'm glad to see that you are still doing you and that now you're with, what is it, Bearing Arms? You're out there now?
Yes, sir.
Got the new show, and you know what? The action doesn't stop, man, and I'm glad to see you're still out there and you're still educating citizens about guns and the history of gun control and gun rights and what we can do to ensure that these rights exist for at least another generation, man.
I really appreciate that, Rick. I mean, you and I go back a long time, and I'm just thrilled that you are getting the platform that you're getting right now with Tucker Carlson, two parts. So part one aired on Tuesday, part two coming up Wednesday night, and they're looking at, it sounds to me like a pretty simple concept, why people who live in Detroit might want to legally be armed for self-defense.
And the thing is, man, is that, and you know it from Cam and Company, Detroit is one of the very few cities in America, large cities in America, where you have shell issue. When you have large urban areas, it typically is a place that's like entrenched with gun control.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a firearms trainer here for a long time, man, and for good or for bad, quite a few of my students have actually had those life or death situations in which they were forced to use lethal force to defend themselves, man. And I guess from their standpoint, and I really think about it, it made sense for them to contact me because I've trained a lot of people that actually had to pull their gun in righteous, judicious self-defense and use it to defend themselves and other people. And of all the people I've known and helped that have defended themselves, we were able to get two people. And, it's intimidating to go before a national audience.
Sure it is.
But two people that were willing to do it, man. And the next person that's going to be have the spotlight put on them is a guy you all know who, of course, one of my students, Marcus Weldon.
Oh, yeah.
They called him the Spanish shooter.
Yeah.
So Marcus is going to get under the spotlight tonight. And people who are listening to the show, man, they saw the first segment. It's on the internet. Google it, find it, watch it. But make sure you watch Tucker Carlson tonight and see Marcus Weldon, the guy that they call the Spanish shooter. He's going to be awesome tonight.
Yeah, Marcus has an incredible story, and it highlights a couple of things that I think gun control advocates, really don't want to talk about. They make it sound like concealed carry holders can, go out there and commit murder on the streets of Detroit and nothing ever happens to him. Here's a guy who acted in self-defense who was actually charged with a crime, right? And it was a jury of his peers that found him not guilty because he was again, he was acting to aid another. He was coming from a Christmas party, so he was in a Santa Claus suit when he was forced to protect a woman, and then he ends up getting charged. So there are legal risks that come with self-defense. Thankfully, one of the other things that you have going for you there in Detroit, not only is Detroit, a shall issue city, part of a shall issue state, but you've got a police chief there in Chief James Craig, who really does support the right of the people to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, man. With Marcus, his story is very compelling because a lot of people, when they first start thinking about right to carry, and they look at their, environment, where they live, and they're realists and they understand that, hey, I'm a good person, I don't bother anyone, but I do realize that the possibility exists that trouble may come to my door. Mm-hmm. And Marcus was one of those persons, and he did things the right way. He took a carry class, and I'm honored to have been his firearms trainer and got his carry permit, man, and he was forced to defend himself and a coworker, a woman, and saved his life and saved her life. But, the thing that people don't realize, it's not like the movies, man. When you pull that trigger, you're using lethal force, whether the person you shot or that you're attempting to defend yourself against, whether they perish or not, you're still facing the judgment of the legal system. And Marcus truly went through hell, and he wrote about his experiences in a book that he wrote called The Santa Shooter. And yes, we live in a city, man, in a state, the great state of Michigan, city of Detroit. Our police chief, James Craig, has always been an ardent supporter of men and women of this town, of this region, of this state, who are law-abiding, can pass all the background checks and jump through all the hoops, and to carry and not only have the gun in their possession, but to use it lawfully, And so he is going to be a great shining example of why, men and women in this country go armed into life society, man.
Absolutely. And I remember talking to Chief Craig, this has been a few years now, is right after he made his first comments in support of right to carry. And one of the things that's sort of unusual, I mean, you see sheriffs around the country talk about their support for the Second Amendment. Rarely do you see police chiefs, and really rare is it for you to see a police chief in a big city talk about his support for right to carry or the Second Amendment. And that's because a lot of times these chiefs are political appointments. They want to keep their head down. If they work in a deep blue city, they probably got an anti-gun boss, and so they don't want to talk about that. But Chief Craig was actually appointed not through the normal process, because at that point, Detroit didn't have a mayor because of the corruption and the city's fiscal problems. So there was basically a city manager that was a non-political position, right. and that was the individual who hired Chief Craig. And Chief Craig told me, he said he felt like he had the freedom to speak up and to speak out. And he said there are lots of other chiefs who feel the same way I do, but they don't feel like they've got the ability to say the things that I can say. And so I appreciate Chief Craig for taking that stand. And I wish that, frankly, more of those chiefs who felt the same way he did around the country would go ahead and take that political risk and that political calculation to stand up in the support of the right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, man, his background is really interesting. Lifetime in public service and law enforcement. And it was in his experiences, man, where he was actually, put into an environment in which he was trying to carry some of that old way of thinking into a community where he was a police chief. I forget which state it was, man, but they were like, hey, wait a minute, we have a different take on this. There's nothing wrong with good people carrying guns to defend themselves. And he evolved, before he got to Detroit. And then we went through the whole bankruptcy thing here, and, we had a guy come in, and he was like running the city until we could get our finances together. And he brought in Chief Craig. And let me tell you, it was a great thing that he found Chief Craig and brought him here. And he brought those, pro-gun sentiments to Detroit, man. And all we're asking, man, is that we let law-abiding citizens who jump through all the hoops, who've done everything that's been asked of us to demonstrate that we can be trusted, with carrying a gun and polite society, and carry it with only the thought that, we know the responsibility that goes along with it, and we will be, we will do the right thing. And man, Chief Craig has been, great for the city, and glad that he's still on the job because through his time here in Detroit, we've actually had, power restored back to the city, and now, we have people who make the decisions of who's going to be our police chief, but they retained him despite his pro-gun beliefs,
right?
Man, and we're glad to have him.
Absolutely. Now, listen, you are not a guy who likes to pat himself on the back a whole lot, but I want to pat you on the back a little bit because, this segment last night and tonight on Tucker highlighting self-defense in Detroit, they talk with one of your students, they talk with Chief Craig, but they also talk with you, because you have been a real leader in Detroit in terms of Second Amendment advocacy and advocacy for the right to defend yourself. In fact, every year you put on this incredible event, Rick, where, close to 700 people now are coming out, 700 women are coming out and they're learning about firearms for the very first time. What is it that keeps you so involved and so connected and to keep pushing this idea that, you've got a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, you've got a human right of self-defense, and you should be exercising it?
Man, many years ago, it's probably like close to 15 years now, man, I actually, found out what it felt like to be a crime victim. I got robbed in my own driveway, man, and that forced me to take a long look at some of the beliefs that I had about guns and the people who carry them. And I went through a personal evolution, and I had an epiphany, and I decided, there's nothing wrong with a good person, following the laws and doing everything that's asked of them, to do the right thing with guns, man. And I just became consumed with learning, and I became a NRA firearms trainer and a training counselor. And through that whole evolution, man, it was a few years into it, I saw a story where a woman was violently attacked and her body was just laid out in the street, as if she was trash. And that affected me greatly. And so I just wanted to give back, man. I leveraged the friendships that I made in the gun movement, and we trained 50 women that first year, and we gave them a free lesson and paid for everything. And that event, man, I'm so proud of it. It has grown to the point where earlier this year, man, right after weekend after Mother's Day, we trained 814 women how to use a gun. And undaunted, we are going to train the weekend after Mother's Day. We're going to train over 1,000. If it's 1,001, I'll take it. But I'm going to train 1,000 women in one day how to use a gun.
All right, you know what? I have not been able to make it up to one of these events.
Man, because I wanted you guys to come out and be on site. I was like, look, this is a big thing. I want Cam and Pop and the whole crew, the broadcast line, all this shit, man.
Well, I don't know if I can get the whole gang back together. I would love it if we could, but I tell you what, I'm going to do my darndest, Rick, to get up there to Michigan weekend after Mother's Day next year, because I want to see this, I want to cover this. And I want to be a part of that event because it's really incredible. We talk about it with you every year. You've been nice enough to put us in contact with some of the attendees and some of the other volunteer instructors, and it really does just seem like an incredible event. So, where would you say? Are even before your phone's gonna be blowing up now that you've been on, Fox News 2 nights in a row, primetime TV. So I won't ask you what's happening today, but what's been happening the last, let's say 6 months or so since that event around Mother's Day? Are people in Detroit, are they still interested in practicing self-defense and getting their concealed carry license? How busy are you? Because I know you're going to be a lot busier going forward, but how busy have you been?
Man, been busy and going to stay busy. Fortunately for us, we're in better economic times than has before. That's just in line with what's happening nationally. Things aren't as bad as they've been, economically, but we still have our issues, man. We still have our troubles. But let me tell you, people are still responding. They're still taking classes, and they're still getting their carry permits. And the thing that really drives this thing home, man, I got a text message, not a phone call, because this woman couldn't call me directly based on her circumstances, man. she's in a situation and her life she feels is being threatened. And she reached out to me today, man. It's like, look, I need this, I need you to help me if we need to do something special, but I need, to get my permit done, in an expedited fashion. So, yeah, I do those things, man. No matter what's going on, I still make time for that one person, that one woman that's like, look, I need help. I'm in danger. And so when she calls me later today, I will scrap what I'm doing and we will make plans to go to a range and we'll get her the training she needs so she can get an emergency CPL on an emergency basis and have it issued and be ready to go to protect herself, man. And I don't make it seem like, it's not a big decision. It is, man, but there are people, who are in bad situations, man, and I'm honored to assist them.
You're a good man, Rick Ector. I appreciate you coming on the program, and it's so good talking with you again. On Twitter at DetroitCCW. Where can folks find you on Facebook?
Man, same name, Detroit CCW or Rick Ector, RICKECTOR. I got several pages, and let me tell you, after Tucker Carlson, I think everybody found all of them on Facebook, and that's a great thing. I called my ISP to say, hey, man, what can y'all do for my website, in terms of bandwidth?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, nothing within the next 3 days, so I'm going to get blasted again, but I'm not complaining. If there are people out there that like the things that we're doing in Detroit and they want to see if they can duplicate them in their hometown, my door's open and I'm willing to help people because I want to grow this thing. I want to train women all over the country, man.
I think that is that would be a fantastic thing to do, and we're going to watch you and help any way we can. Rick Ector, as always, man, great talking to you. Thank you so much for everything you do. Rick is such a good guy. All right, a couple of news stories to get to before we get to our armed citizen story, our recidivism report, and our good deed of the day. Late Tuesday afternoon, an Allegheny County judge struck down 3 local gun control ordinances in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, Mayor Bill Peduto says he is going to appeal the decision. That is not unexpected. This whole thing actually has been designed by gun control activists to try to get to Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. This is the reason why Mayor Bill Peduto put these 3 local gun control ordinances in effect in the first place, because gun control activists are waging a nationwide campaign to undo and to undermine firearms preemption laws. Now, those laws are on the books in 44 states around the country, and they say it's the state legislature that's going to set a uniform gun law across the entire state, so you don't have this patchwork quilt of ordinances, which is what gun control advocates want, because it makes it legally more dangerous to be a gun owner and travel from point A to point B, but it also makes it easier for municipalities to enact gun control measures, and it's harder for Second Amendment advocates and Second Amendment supporters to try to pursue legal remedies against 4 dozen different municipalities for passing 4 dozen different gun control laws, as opposed to let's say an unconstitutional gun law that gets put in at the state level, simply filing that one lawsuit. So they're trying to, again, undermine the Second Amendment. They, again, suffered a defeat in court yesterday where the Allegheny County judge made it crystal clear that these 3 ordinances, one dealing with the discharge of a quote-unquote assault weapon within the city limits, one dealing with magazine possession within the city limits, or using a magazine, because possession they can't regulate. Using a magazine they were trying to get away with. And then a local version of a red flag law. Allegheny County judge says, listen, it doesn't matter what type of games you were trying to play here. The intent of the legislature was clear. They're the body that sets a uniform firearms policy across the entire state. So a defeat for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but they are going to consider or continue to pursue legal action in the Court of Appeals. Meanwhile, Tacoma, Washington. Now, Tacoma, Washington delayed a vote on a gun and ammo tax that was scheduled to take place Tuesday night. This after the city council chamber was packed with gun owners and Second Amendment supporters who are objecting to this tax. They've been calling for this for a couple of months now. There's a council member named Ryan Mello who's behind this idea. It's based on, in fact, it's a carbon copy of a tax that was put in place in Seattle, Washington back in 2015. And Ryan Mello insists that this is not about punishing gun owners. This is not some sort of, punitive act to make it more expensive to own a gun, that this is about reducing gun-related violence. I don't believe him. And here's why. So when Seattle decided that it was going to institute this tax, the supporters said it was going to raise between, I think one of the estimates I saw was something like $600,000 a year. Then it was revised downward, maybe $300,000 a year. It's bringing in less than $100,000 a year in tax revenue. And 80% of that tax revenue is coming from one store in Seattle, because a lot of gun stores either closed or moved so that they would not be unfairly burdened by these extra taxes that suburban shops and shops in King County, not in Seattle proper, would have to pay. They can avoid paying those taxes, so why would you go shop at the more expensive store when you can drive a few miles out of your way and you get your guns and ammunition even cheaper? Now, by the way, not only did it not raise as much tax revenue as the supporters claimed it would, it also didn't do anything to reduce violent crime, because violent crime is actually up in Seattle, Washington from where it was back in 2015. Okay, so it doesn't reduce crime, doesn't raise a lot of money, but it does punish gun stores, and it does make it more expensive to exercise your right to keep and bear arms. It sounds kind of punitive to me. And it sounded kind of punitive for the dozens of gun owners and Second Amendment supporters who showed up at the City Hall in Tacoma, Washington on Tuesday night. So the city council members say, we're going to amend this. We're holding it back for 2 weeks because we're going to put up some amendments here. I don't know what amendments they're going to offer. If they're going to, try to lower the taxes, I don't think that's going to happen. Are they going to try to carve out some loopholes? I don't know. But we're not done with this gun and ammo tax in Tacoma. And by the way, Ryan Mello has been very vocal in saying that if Tacoma can do it, it's one thing for, the liberals in Seattle to pass a gun and ammo tax, but Tacoma's supposed to be a little bit more conservative. And Mello has been very vocal in saying, listen, if we can do this in Tacoma, then other cities around the state of Washington are going to do this as well. So again, at the end of the day, it is about making it more expensive to exercise a constitutional right. Okay, shall we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, our Citizen Report? I think we should, as a matter of fact. And let's start with our career criminal from Wausau, Wisconsin. A guy named Henry West, earlier this month, ended up shooting 3 people at a cemetery in Wausau, Wisconsin. And as it turns out, this guy's been in trouble for decades, not even just a few years. He's 64 years old. The Wausau Daily Herald says that Henry Victor West's criminal record starts back in the 1980s in Illinois and includes assaults on police officers and a threat with a firearm, yet police say he was able to get his hands on a gun that he used to kill Patty Grimm, the general manager at Pine Grove Cemetery. He's also accused of shooting and seriously injuring cemetery foreman William Bushy, as well as Rosamella Short, who was the mother of another cemetery worker. Back in 2013, the paper reports that West was able to avoid criminal charges after fighting with a neighbor there in Wausau, Wisconsin. In fact, they say Marathon County prosecutors offered West a deal after the 2013 fight that's not usually granted to people who have a criminal record. And West had an extensive criminal history. His record includes injuring a woman by pushing her to the ground, punching a man in the face, hitting and spitting police officers, threatening somebody with a gun. Those charges out of DuPage County, Illinois. The 64-year-old grew up in Illinois, and his sister, who was contacted by the Wausau Daily Herald, says she hasn't talked to him in 20 years, said she was not surprised to learn that he's involved in a shooting. She said, quote, he was always crazy. She says she remembers being, quote, deathly afraid of her brother growing up. He's 64 years old. She said he once pushed their sister through a sliding glass door. She said, our mother spent a lot of time bailing him out of jail. So this is just a partial list of charges here. 1982, charged with obstructing an officer, sentenced to 6 months probation, violated that probation when he was charged with battery in June of 1983 for shoving a woman to the ground, injuring her wrist, shoulder, and her arm. He was convicted in November of that year, sentenced to 10 days in jail. 1986, arrested on suspicion of DUI. He beat the rap there. 1986, property damage charge dismissed, accused of breaking a man's kitchen window. January of 1987, pleaded guilty to driving with a suspended revoked license, sentenced to supervision. Later that year, 1987, punched a man in the face, struggled with officers. And after that incident, after he punched the guy in the face, when officers came to arrest him, he ended up threatening the officer with a pipe wrench, spitting on the officer. After those two incidents, prosecutors charged him with 2 counts of battery, resisting an officer, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He was convicted of 1 count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, battery, and resisting an officer. And in February of 1988, a judge sentenced him to 30 days in jail. Yeah. With work release, as well as 12 months probation. He violated that probation. He got an additional 90 days in jail. Then in November of 87, he was charged with 2 counts of battery after he hit a police officer, 14 days in the county jail. Twice in October 1988, he's arrested for DUI. And again, assaults officers. Pleaded guilty in May of 1989 to DUI, resisting an officer, and battery. Then he gets 350 days in the county jail. 1995, again, another driving charge. February of 95, another DUI. He's got 120 days in jail there. And then between 1997 and 2012, they don't have any records for him, at least not in Illinois and not in Wisconsin. But in 2013, police there in Wausau arrested him after he got into a fight with a neighbor at his apartment complex. The neighbor was also arrested, later convicted of disorderly conduct. West could have been charged with misdemeanor battery and disorderly conduct, but instead they offered him a deferred prosecution agreement. Basically, stay out of trouble and we won't prosecute this case, which is normally offered to low-risk first-time offenders, not somebody with the criminal history that Mr. West had. He completed 20 hours of community service, and the charges were dropped. And now Wausau police say that they have at least 4 contacts with West before the day of the shooting, but, quote, would not release those reports to the Daily Herald. Department said that it was keeping the record secret out of fear that releasing them might reasonably prevent West from receiving a fair trial and could re-victimize those listed in the reports and their family members. That's I got to tell you, that's a pretty interesting reason for not releasing police reports to a newspaper. That you're concerned it could prejudice the jurors in the trial. I guess I understand where the police are coming from. At the same time, this is Mr. West's criminal history. Previous criminal history is absolutely newsworthy. And the paper, I believe, has every right to that public record. One thing is for sure, law enforcement had lots of opportunities to address Mr. West more seriously than it did over the decades. And now, unfortunately, he stands accused of the most serious crime of all, taking another human life. Now, our armed citizen story of the day from Atlanta, Georgia, where a concealed carry holder fought back against a gentleman who was trying to rob him. Well, probably not a gentleman. Atlanta police say they were called to the 200 block of Forsyth Street around 1:15 Monday afternoon to respond to a shooting. Officers said they got there. They found a man who was injured. They also were able to make contact with the guy who shot the injured man. He told officers a man approached him, tried to rob him, and in order to prevent the robbery, he pulled out his gun and shot. Now, the alleged suspect did try to take off, but police said he was taken into custody by nearby officers. Investigators still looking at the incident, but from what we understand, this is being viewed as a case of self-defense. We will try to bring you any more details as they become available. And our good deed of the day from Pinellas Park, Florida, where a police officer in the right place at the right time and able to save a 73-year-old man inside a burning home. Pinellas Park police officer Jeffrey DeTrano just happened to be patrolling and saw a lot of commotion at a home. Noticed the smoke pouring out. This is about 4 o'clock in the morning on October the 25th. Calls had been made to 911, but Officer DeTrano was the first to arrive on scene. When he got there, he looked through a back door and saw 73-year-old Christopher Jones crouched down inside that room there. He said the room he was in wasn't actually on fire, but it was coming his way. DeTrano said, I went in. I picked him up. He wasn't able to walk at the time, so I kind of dragged him out. One of the neighbors, Gene Robbins, says he feels like the officer saved his friend's life. He said when they got him out, I heard him say 1 more minute, and he could have been dead. Officer DeTrano says that he was happy to help. He says, we don't get a lot of fire training as police officers. He says, but the instincts definitely kicked in. I signed up for this job to serve and protect and help save lives. 73-year-old taken to a local hospital. He was treated and released. He is going to be okay. So again, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Pinellas Park Police Officer Jeffrey DeTrano, we thank you for your very, very good deed. That is all the time that we have for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Thank you for joining us on the program. Coming up on tomorrow's show, we're going to talk with Jason Rance, talk show host out of Seattle, Washington, about that proposed gun and ammo tax in Tacoma and how likely it is that we might see similar proposals introduced in communities across the state of Washington. In the meantime, you can subscribe to the program on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, townhall.com as well. And, of course, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube as well, and you can make sure to never miss an episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for spreading the word. We'll see you back here tomorrow, perhaps even in costume, for a Halloween edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.